Hello everybody, I'm Coach Tickety, and today we're going to be breaking down all the tanks in Overwatch 2 for Season 4 of Competitive. Now, there weren't too many changes here to the tank line, so it's probably going to be a familiar-ish looking tier list, but that's okay. We can still talk about why these heroes all deserve their spots, even if we didn't get a flashy new hero like those support players did. And if you guys like this type of content, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know down in the comments which tanks do you think need some changes. We all know Roadhog's rework is coming eventually, but who else do you think needs some love or needs some hate? Who would you want to see get reworked or changed in some way? Let us know down in the comments. I'm curious to see what you guys think. And if you're looking for a competitive edge this season, don't forget to check out GameLeap.com. Over on our website, we have hundreds of guides with more being added every single week made by our top level coaches. And these go super in depth. You will find everything there from basic fundamentals about the game to in-depth step-by-step character guides. So whether you're new to the game, picking up a new hero for this season, or really trying to grind out ranked and hit that top 500 spot on the leaderboards, there is something over on our website that can help you reach your goals. So click that link below the video or just head over to GameLeap.com and get your membership started today. Now let's kick off this list with, of course, the infamous Roadhog. We unfortunately still have no idea when Roadhog is going to get his rework, but it still stands that he doesn't really have a strong identity right now. His hook is still fairly powerful, his damage output is decent, but at the end of the day, he's kind of just a big fat DPS waddling around the map, making it easy for the enemy to charge ultimates off of him or just outright kill him most of the time. Unless you're finding really strong value from displacing your enemies with a hook, or maybe able to find some environmental kills with it, I wouldn't recommend Roadhog very often this season. Next up in the C tier is going to be Zarya, and this pains me to say because I love Zarya as a hero, but she's straight up pretty bad right now. Similar to Lifeweaver actually in the support line, a lot of her utility focuses too much on her allies. If she's just using self bubbles in the front line, she just doesn't stand up to the likes of other frontline heroes like Ramattra, Orisa, or Reinhardt, and unless she's able to enact really strong synergy with teammates for ally bubbles, again in your ranked games that's probably not happening too often, then you're just going to be falling behind with bubble usage as Zarya, and you're not going to be able to get much damage off either because you don't have that much staying power compared to other tanks. Zarya does have one of the strongest ultimates in the game, of course, with Graviton Surge, but if you're losing every fight you don't have Grav, it's not really worth the pick. Moving up to the B tier, starting with Doomfist. Doomfist is one of those hard heroes to rank because if you are a Doomfist one trick and you've mastered all of the technical skills required to play this hero at a very high level, he could easily be S tier. But for an average player doing average mechanical things with him, he's really not that strong, and compared to some other dive tanks, he's really not that consistent either. Doomfist will always be one of the best heroes in the game for montage level clips and things like that, but for actually winning most of your games, you'll probably want to have a couple secondary picks just in case Doomfist isn't working out. Next up is Junker Queen, and Junker Queen, again, one of those super fun heroes. I love playing Junker Queen, but she just gets outclassed in too many situations. She's definitely got a leg up against her other Australian counterpart Roadhog, but again, she's kind of just a big DPS at the end of the day. She does have better cooldowns and more frequent damage output and things like that, as well as a much stronger ultimate than Roadhog, but she doesn't really do tanking duties very well. She doesn't engage a fight very well unless she lands a really big knife throw, and she can't really stay in the front line for very long unless she's getting pumped full of heals from her teammates. So usually going to get outclassed unless you can land every single one of your abilities consistently. Next up in the B tier is going to be Sigma, who was one of the two tanks that got nerfed this season. The damage from his accretion, the giant boulder that he throws, has gone down, but the stun duration has gone up. So he's no longer able to fully one-shot a 200 HP hero. If you didn't know, you could hit them with the rock and then both of your primary fire spheres and it would do more than 200 damage, but now you'll need a little bit of help from your teammates to actually finish those kills. And the stun duration might help with that, but it's a pretty short window still. Sigma feels like a kind of jack of all trades, master of none type of tank. He can kind of hold the front line, he can kind of poke out the enemy, he can kind of absorb pressure defensively, but he's not better at any of those things than some other tanks in the lineup. So unless you need to be jumping between duties as a tank and you need to respond to a bunch of different types of threats all at once, Sigma doesn't feel like the strongest pick in a lot of situations. Moving up to the A tier, we're going to start off with D.Va. Whenever I think about D.Va, I like to think of her as a sort of first responder, like an ambulance or a fire truck going to an emergency. Your games will be filled with emergencies, whether that's a teammate going aggressive, an enemy sniper popping up, or anything of the sort like that, and there is no better tank in the game to respond to those situations and get on the scene quickly. The combination of D.Va's mobility and the flexibility of her defense matrix means she is pretty much always ready to go in any situation, as long as she's in her mech, of course. And while her damage output isn't that great, it's usually more than enough to make situations go her way. Maybe she can turn a 1v1 into a 2v1, or catch an enemy out of position when they're out of cooldowns and really finish the job. D.Va's definitely a solid pick this season, but I wouldn't recommend getting too aggressive with her since her defensive resources is where she really shines. Next up is Orisa. If you need a tank to win in the front line, Orisa does it better than anyone else. She has so much staying power, so much defensive utility, and a good chunk of damage and crowd control from her javelin available to her. She does suffer when it comes to long sight lines or an abundance of flank routes, but usually as long as you can find a strong corner to lock down or a choke point to force the enemy into, Orisa will absolutely dominate anyone that comes too close to her. And there's really not much else to the character. She's fairly simple and easy to play, and you know that as long as you use your cooldowns properly and don't waste them all, you will have a good time in the front line and pretty much live forever. Next up, we're going to talk about Wrecking Ball. Wrecking Ball, while being one of the more mechanically demanding tanks in the roster, in my opinion still has some of the most consistent engage potential. This is due to his insane mobility potential, how frequently he can engage and disengage, as well as his ability to put up shields and hide his hitbox and simply roll away whenever the time calls for it. Wrecking Ball is also one of the best tanks at displacing enemies, knocking them off high grounds, forcing them out into open space and things like that, as well as has one of the easiest ultimates to find value with, since you can just set and forget the mines and the enemy can't walk around that area anymore. Definitely not a simple tank to pick up and not the easiest to play on every single map, but in the right hands, in the right situations, Wrecking Ball can really get things rolling for his team. Next up, we're going to talk about Winston, another dive tank up here in the A tier. Winston and Wrecking Ball have similar engage options, but Winston's a lot more simpler in his execution and therefore doesn't have quite as much potential mechanically as Wrecking Ball either. He does, however, have an extremely strong tool in his bubble shield. I also believe there's going to be a shifting trend away from Brawl more into dive-focused compositions this season with the nerfs to Reinhardt and Cassidy, and with some of these other divers gone untouched, they seem a little bit stronger on paper, and Winston synergizes with dive heroes better than any other tank in the game since allies can use his bubbles very easily to get aggressive. Just don't expect to get too many kills as Winston since his damage output is fairly lackluster, but there is no better tank to easily fit into any composition with mobility since he can get the ball rolling very quickly and benefit his teammates with that bubble. And last up in the A tier, we have Reinhardt, who, like I said, has suffered from a slight nerf this patch. Now, obviously, he's still very strong. This wasn't that big of a change, but it should make him slightly easier to deal with against teams that have been struggling against those brawl compositions that Reinhardt thrives in. The change that we saw was a reduction to his armor, reduced by 50, but an increase to his health by 25. So he's got overall 25 less max HP, but overall as well 50 less armor than before. So he's going to be losing that armor threshold sooner than before. Again, this isn't a massive change to Reinhardt or anything like that, but it is going to make him more dependent on his shield or other defensive resources and make it harder for him to get in and start swinging his hammer. This is especially going to feel bad against heroes with a lot of poke damage since his armor is really important to his survivability. But overall, Reinhardt is still going to be one of the best frontliners for any fast-moving brawl-centric composition since he still does an insane amount of damage and Earthshatter can win a fight at the press of a button. Moving up to the S tier, we've only got one hero here and it's going to be Ramattra. I really wish Ramattra wasn't as good as he actually is, but he simply has tools for every situation as well as strong poke damage, close range burst, and an extremely easy to use while still being very powerful ultimate ability. Similar to Orisa, as long as you're not pressing all your buttons all at once and wasting cooldowns, you're going to have tons of defensive capabilities with your Nemesis form block and of course your shield. And then, similar to Reinhardt, you also benefit from getting up close and personal with your enemies by damaging them with your punches as well as keeping them close with your Ravenous Vortex. And while Annihilation isn't the flashiest, biggest playmaking tool in the game for an ultimate, it's extremely easy to use and it's almost impossible to not find value with it as long as you've got one or two enemies nearby. And again, you'll be charging that ultimate so frequently with all the poke damage you're able to put out in your Omnic form. He simply is ready for any situation, has very strong cooldowns, a very simple and powerful ultimate. He's just kind of got some of everything and he should be able to thrive in many situations on any map with any team composition and still be able to find some win conditions that benefit him specifically. And that will round out my tier list of all the tanks in Overwatch 2 for Season 4. until we get some more tanks or until we see some people reworked, I don't see this list changing too much. So again, it's probably pretty familiar looking. There hasn't been too many changes since last season, not too many reworks or big buffs or nerfs. So this is looking like a pretty stable list right now. It seems like the devs are pretty happy with tank balance as it stands. If you like the videos we put out on YouTube here, if you find this stuff helpful, then the guides on our website will blow your mind. Over there, you'll find everything you need to become the best player you can be, starting with basic fundamentals and game knowledge, all the way up to in-depth step-by-step hero courses to maximize your playstyle. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below this video or go to GameLeap.com today and get your membership started right now. Anyway, that's all from me today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.